I'm sat in my tack room recording, I guess, a little bit of an unusual video because I don't really see people talk about this very much, and I think it's a really important part of owning a horse. So I want to go through kind of equestrian budgeting and how much my horses cost. I'm going to do it based on one horse and how I budget over a month. Now, this is going to be completely different for everyone. There is no denying that horses are an expense, and I'm super privileged to have grown up with them and to now be able to afford them myself. It is a lifestyle choice, so for some people, maybe kind of their parents can afford it or they can afford it, and they don't have to forego anything else because they've worked super hard and their wages cover everything. But for a lot of people, I think it is a lifestyle choice and they are going to sacrifice other things so that they can afford horses. So for example, I don't really eat out much, I don't buy a lot of makeup and clothes and do much shopping because I want to spend my money on my horses and my hobby and my passion. These costs are going to be different depending on where you live, what quality of things you want to get, what you can afford. So it's by no means a definite guide. It's just kind of to give you a bit of an insight into what it costs me and hopefully kind of get people talking about it a little bit more, because I think money is a huge part of mental health, and having people talk about it and be realistic, I think is really helpful, and it's kind of something that I would be interested in watching too, to see how people manage their budget and how much stuff costs for them. So without further ado, we'll go through kind of my definite monthly budget things that I have to have, and then the things that I think that you have to have, but once you've bought them, you've got them. So one of my main expenses is obviously livery and the stable that my horses are in and the field that I have. So it costs me per horse, with a stable and turnout, it would cost £155 a month. That's on the lower end of the scale because it's DIY. It can cost up to that a week or even more if you're at a really fancy yard, but that's kind of one of the biggest costs that we have monthly, and obviously I pay more than that per horse, but we'll do just for one horse for this video. So as part of the things that are kind of necessities when you own a horse, but not necessarily something you have to factor into a monthly budget, is obviously your tack. So you can go as fancy or as kind of low end of the price spectrum as you can afford and as you want, but I would say that investing in good quality tack is going to last longer, and it'll be comfier for the horse and things like that. So I have one bridle for each of my horses and one saddle, one girth, and then I've got one kind of spare bridle and then a couple of spare girths and things, and then usually 2 saddle pads. So I like to have 2 sets of saddle pads, 2 sets of boots for each horse, so that when one is dirty you can use one, and then you can have one in the wash and you can swap them over. Now we're in the feed room. So obviously some horses need hard feed, some horses don't. Dietary requirements really differ between the size of horse, how much exercise they're doing, whether they're a good doer or a poor doer. But I spend about £45 a month on my feed and things. And Joe, I have 3 horses obviously, and they're on different feeds and stuff, but it's around that mark. I wouldn't always have to buy it monthly because I don't do it monthly. I kind of tend to buy in bulk and go out, but I like to kind of know all my expenses and break them down over the year and put money aside into a bank account that's just for horsey things, so that I only have to put like so much in it each month, and that accumulates and pays for everything throughout the year. You've also got to think about things like vaccinations, worming, when your horse needs a physio, chiropractor, osteopath, the dentist, things like that. So things that aren't a monthly expense, well maybe physio would be, and farrier is almost a monthly expense, but I budget that separately because it is kind of more regular. But for things that don't happen regularly on a cycle and are kind of only maybe twice a year for a dentist, maybe every other month for a physio, twice a year for worming and things, I like to budget them in monthly, again to put a little bit of money aside each month so I know that it's there when I need it. So I put £125 aside in my horse. I have like the special account into the horse account, and then that will pay for whenever I need a physio, if I need to buy some worming stuff, and it just means that I don't have a month where I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to fork out this much money this month. It's already there. I've already kind of saved it, ready for when I need those things. So another expense, and this will differ greatly depending how much grazing you would have, how much your horses are in, whether it's summer or winter, but I put aside £22 per horse a month for haylage, these big bales. So one of these bales would probably last one of my horses in the winter a couple of weeks, maybe a little bit more, depending on kind of temperatures and how much the grass is growing and things. The other thing obviously I budget for is farrier. So my horses are all on a 6-week cycle, so I put aside £56 a month to pay for the farrier to come every 6 weeks, and sometimes he obviously has to come more because usually Qantas has taken up a shoe and he has to come back, and every time they put a shoe back on it's around the £10 to £30 mark, so depending on how much work they need to do. So it's always good to factor those little things in. So I'm really lucky to have transport. I bought my lorry on a loan and I pay it off monthly, but I'm not going to add that to the normal monthly fees. You don't have to have transport, I guess, but it's good because you can get out and about, and also if there's an emergency and you need to take a horse to an equine hospital, you can. So transport costs me about £60 a month with kind of insurance, road tax and things like that. Talking of insurance, I also insure the horses. I insure with NFU, and that costs about £33 a month for the insurance I'm on, but depending on what you do with your horse and how expensive it was to buy in the first place will vary depending on how much you have to pay. I think insurance is really important. I get public liability insurance through being a member of EGB, but this is in terms of veterinary fees and accidents, because I mean Azid has already paid me back, I think, in how much it costs for all his injuries, but it just gives me that peace of mind that if something happens I'm not going to get a huge bill that I can't pay, I need to get a credit card out for. Some people do that, so they're not insured for veterinary fees, and if something does happen then they'll take out like a 0% credit card or get a loan to pay. But I just think I like to be insured. It just makes everything so much easier for me, and I know if they were never injured that's a lot of money to pay for their whole lives, but yeah, it's part of what I think is a necessary monthly expense. And then in winter we have bedding, so this is a new expense for me because this will be the first winter that I've got a horse in at night, and that cost me, because I use the wood pellets, it's actually not as expensive as if I was on shavings. That cost me about £20 a month because I put a new bag in every week. Obviously the setup costs a bit more. I put about 8 bags in to set it up, so you've got to kind of factor that in, but overall it's about £20 a month for bedding. So everything in total, kind of for what I set aside for my monthly budget, comes to about £516, and that's for one horse. It's not kind of that much for each horse because it kind of works out with kind of the transport, insurances and stuff like that a little bit cheaper, but it's still fairly expensive per horse, but that's kind of what I decide to spend my money on. And then we are in my kit corner. There are a few things that I would deem kind of necessities that you need to buy, but once you've bought them, hopefully you only have to buy them once. So for example, these are my rug boxes, and I think really you need 5. So a cooler, a lightweight waterproof rug, a medium weight waterproof rug. It never gets cold enough really here for me to put heavy weights on, and if so I just put a cotton sheet underneath, and then a fly rug and a travel rug, so that's 5. Also with Grooming Kit I think you actually don't need that much stuff, so I only really use 4 tools: a body brush, a dandy brush, a curry comb and a hoof pick. And then obviously I have fencing. I think it's really good. You never know when you might need to make like a little rehab paddock or strip graze something. So I think kind of a minimum 20 posts, 100 meters of tape, and an energizer is a really good thing to have, and I would deem as a necessity. And then yard tools, so obviously I've got my wheelbarrow, a poo picker, I've got a shovel, a proper like scrubby brush, a flicky brush and a shavings fork. As well as yard tools, obviously buckets for the horses. I like to have 2 feed buckets for them all. I'm not going to talk about my endurance crew kit because that's about 40 buckets, many water containers, and it's kind of not applicable really because it's not a necessity. But I like to have 2 buckets for them, a water bucket each. And then first aid, I think that's a necessity, a really well equipped first aid kit. You don't have to spend loads of money, just enough to stop any bleeding and dress any minor wounds, and kind of make sure your horse stays as safe as possible until the vet comes. So hopefully this video will have been useful, a little bit of an insight into kind of the cost of having a horse. Hopefully not too shocked over how much a horse does cost, and obviously some people will be paying less, some people will be paying more. It's completely individual. I think it's completely worth it. My parents worked hard to let me have horses when I was little, which I'm super grateful for, and I've worked really hard to be able to afford them now, and they're a huge part of my life, and I love having them in my life and couldn't imagine it without them. So I will always work my little socks off to be able to afford my horses.